As we've said from the beginning, the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative, this isn't like a CFLRP. It's not like a Joint Chiefs. You don't go and fill out a proposal, and if you get it, you cheer, and you go and do the work, and then you check in a year with what you've done. Or if you don't get it, you set it aside, and then you kind of continue going about your business, and you say, we'll try again next year. This is really about shared stewardship. This is about us coming together individually and collectively, and finding ways we can plan to do the right work in the right places around our shared priorities. And there is discussion in different places about what counts as shared stewardship, what qualifies. And here in the Southwest, shared stewardship and RMRI, these things are interchangeable. We really can't separate them apart. And so we are talking about shared stewardship when we're talking about RMRI in the Southwest. So what we hope to do here is to tell our collective story about how individual partners band together to invest in this landscape and get to larger scale outcomes, and hopefully show you why we're a good investment of your focus, resources, attention, and funding, both now and into the future. So as we mentioned, some of the core elements of shared stewardship really show up not just in our process, but in the way we're doing business here in the Southwest and collectively here in Colorado. So we're working through, we've worked through joint prioritization, developing a cross-boundary strategy, and reaching outcomes at scale. And so throughout this presentation, you're going to see highlights of those three elements, and where the investments and actions of partners spread throughout those three elements really add up to the recipe for us being able to achieve bigger and better outcomes. In addition to kind of being framed around the shared stewardship elements, we also have the backdrop of the RMRI priorities. These were identified at the state level for Colorado as a whole, and then adopted and really embraced locally here by partners as being the core values that we're really trying to protect and mitigate impacts to. So in the Southwest, we started with a landscape. We brought partners together. We identified what kind of key activities and engagement was already happening, and where our priority landscapes would be based on those four values, based on the people in this area, based on the resources in southwestern Colorado. Through this joint prioritization and identifying this priority landscape where we all have shared interests and values, there's been some key actions and impacts. Some of those are happening simultaneously, right? It's like how is the state level prioritization processes an outcome or an impact of the local process? But it's good to keep in mind that Southwestern Colorado team started this over a year ago. And so as the Colorado group was prioritizing and working through its process, it was actively engaged with Southwestern Colorado, and the team there was meeting locally, developing a strategy, developing shared priorities. And really where that's led us to is having this unified multi-partner vision at scale. It's brought additional focus and resources to the area, and really kind of helped us pull together a shared vision for this landscape. Now we have this 750,000 acre landscape. It's like a puzzle. We have to figure out how over the next 10 years, we're going to mitigate the wildfire threats, the threats of population growth to the four core RMRI values. And to do that, it's going to take treating over 30,000 acres a year on public and private lands. So first you start with some of the big puzzle pieces, and it's great to have a lot of help from a lot of good partners. So looking at the Restore initiative, this initiative focused its priorities in southwestern Colorado. The Environmental Impact Fund has been well established in developing a fund for the last couple of years, looking at focuses on bringing resources to work on critical private lands, aligning with the Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program. As you can see in the bottom right, there's strong alignment between RMRI, CFLR, and the EIF boundaries. And then also working with our state partners with DNR and Colorado State Forest Service. And the map on the bottom left, you can see the alignment between our southwestern landscape and the priorities that are identified through their collaborative process to identify their 10-year forest action plan. So first, what does outcome how can this be an outcome? Southwest Colorado, we have a cross-boundary strategy to address shared priorities at scale, and we're ranked the #1 priority for natural resource leaders in the state. I can't stress enough the importance of this, and everybody, including Southwest Colorado and the other 2 landscapes, should be using this and thinking of this as an outcome, because when we identify our shared vision and our shared strategy and our shared outcomes, all of these accomplishments become ours, right? Whether it's an individual landowner working on private lands through NRCS or Colorado State Forest Service, or it's a U.S. Forest Service project that's happening completely, at the landscape scale to mitigate fire threat. Both of those are critical components and within our landscape that need to be done. And without the other, we can't be effective. And so they really are our outcomes once you identify that cross-boundary strategy and priority. And since Colorado as a whole has identified this as a priority, really these outcomes and accomplishments become a collective set of outcomes for the state that we can all be proud of and that we can all point to as our accomplishment. So what does this look like? How does it work in terms of ours and yours? There's so many connections to all this work that I hope to illustrate here, so you can see examples of, like, really, there's not almost ever people acting in isolation, even if we wouldn't expect some of the connections. So, for example, Montrose Forest Products. You'll hear about some of their work here later on, but the partners and the U.S. Forest Service worked with Montrose Forest Products and the rest of the timber industry to identify and align their capacity and capability with products that needed to come off of the forest for our restoration and management goals. In doing so, they invested $20 million. There was an additional $45 million invested by other. That has helped the San Juan National Forest become one of the top timber producing forests in Colorado. And then that pays back, right, to where we're actually supporting the local economy, we're supporting jobs, and then having reduced treatment costs to allow us to get to better outcomes at scale. So Colorado State Forest Service, they, working with NRCS and the American Forest Foundation, the 3 of those organizations came together to invest in critical forester capacity. And in looking out into the future, the investment in that forester capacity has led to work on 6 landowners and an additional over 1,300 acres where we have forest plans and are ready to have shovel-ready projects for coming years. Looking at the Environmental Impact Fund, this is a really big initiative here in the Southwest. This could be potentially the backbone of private lands funding strategy. And a team has been working hard to kind of get this underway and utilize really innovative financing to build a set of payees that can help bring additional resources and a new way of approaching private lands funding. They were initially supported through local investment of the Forest Service and other partners. That has led to regional investment. And recently they were awarded the inaugural Innovative Finance grant from the National Partnership Office of the Forest Service, and now are underway and looking to have that bond in effect in the coming years to start helping everyone out in this landscape. So then, looking at the Restore program, we mentioned that earlier. It's a really neat example where several partners, including Great Outdoors Colorado, the National Fish and Wildlife Federation, and other partners, they came together and they said, let's pool our resources, let's jointly prioritize around some of our critical programs and initiatives, and then let's work as part of RMRI. They were partners with us from the beginning to identify the shared landscapes with the RMRI initiative, and that has led to an investment of $150,000 in the Southwest and in other landscapes. But really, I mean, in itself is a great model of shared stewardship, right? I mean, it really sounds like that, and it's leading to some on-the-ground outcomes. Then our collaboratives. We have really great, strong collaboratives through the Dolores Water Resilient Forest Collaboratives and the Four Rivers Forest Collaboratives. They are our network. There's a constellation of other partners and publics that there are too many to kind of list in dots on this illustration. But these groups, in addition to the State Forest Service, NRCS, Wildfire Adapted Partners, they really are a connection to all those stakeholders and publics that can't be represented in all of our meetings and can't be represented even on a PowerPoint slide like this. They're also critical in sharing information and in leading the development and kind of helping support the submission of a CFLR proposal, of which Southwest Colorado was ranked the #3 project in the country, and should really be seeing benefits from that in the coming years in terms of support to work on public lands. So additionally, the U.S. Forest Service has invested $3.2 million in this landscape in a dedicated position. And National Wild Turkey Federation has invested multiple positions focused in this area. They've supported through their network and communication and advocacy. And I think that's really a big deal, and you can kind of go back and forth on meetings in terms of meeting fatigue, but we've had over 100 meetings that's really gotten us to this point at the Colorado level as a whole. And we couldn't have done that without NWTF staff and funding and support to help kind of get us to that point, to make all those connections and make all of that happen. So building on our first outcome, we now have a cross-partner, cross-collaborative strategy and support. We have investment, and all working towards a shared vision, which really equals outcomes at scale. And that's what we're trying to illustrate, is you need all of those components, and then you need that individual and collective investment to get to this point. So looking at some of the projects, first off, wildfire adapted partners, you can see illustrations of the dots here representing different partners. This is not a comprehensive set of people working in this area. And this is also, again, these are individual partner investments in a lot of cases that people were working on, people were doing this work. And this is why RMRI took note and kind of saw the Southwest as a good investment, was because a lot of this work was already underway and already had a foundation. So Wildfire Adapted Partners has 5 projects in this area, resulting in 40 acres, working with Colorado State Forest Service. Again, working with Colorado State Forest Service, the city of Durango has a 10-acre project that benefit 55 homes. Colorado State Forest Service has multiple projects, including 3 Good Neighbor Authority projects at over 350 acres. The Natural Resource Conservation Service has 16 projects in this landscape at nearly 400 acres. And Montrose Forest Products is working with a large private landowner for a project that is about 1,600 acres in size. All told, combined, it's over 2,000 acres of high priority private lands work that's happening, benefiting over 135 landowners in the RMRI-Southwest footprint. In addition to this, these additional dots represent the U.S. Forest Service, San Juan National Forest Service work in this area. 22 projects completed of the fuels, prescribed fire, vegetation management type projects, benefiting over 25,000 acres on National Forest System lands. And so what does that mean in terms of outcomes? Well, for communities, it's over almost 21,000 acres of accomplishment, benefiting and supporting resilient communities. For water, it's almost 5,000 acres. Wildlife and forests, over 14,000 acres. And then 7 recreation projects where we improved 30 miles of trails, decommissioned 5 miles of roads, and really improved outreach and education through signage in areas where we're increasing our restoration activities. And we're working on developing an ambassador program where we can get people out on the ground talking with other users about the importance of these forest resilient projects and healthy forest type projects. So all told, as many of these projects do benefit multiple values, the cumulative total is over 27,000 acres on public and private lands, which is really an outstanding accomplishment. How does that look relative to the goals that were set in our proposal? Well, for our 2020 goals, the private lands were over 100%, so it was just really just knocked out of the park there at over 2,000 acres. On our public lands goal, we're at about 90%, which puts us at about just under 90% of the way towards our kind of initial year 1 target, which is really great, that over 25,000 acres. And relative to our 10-year goal, we're pretty much on track at 9% of kind of our overall goal for that. And this is what that kind of annual 10-year looks like. We've got our little firefighter on the left, big flames. As we grow and improve and kind of continue to do this work, that firefighter is going to start getting bigger and bigger and in proportion to the flames. So looking ahead, again, a lot of this stuff was already underway, but we are working to develop and refine our strategy. The steering committee that's made up of the natural resource leaders and representatives for water, communities, wildlife, and recreation have started working on a process where they have weighted values and developed a system using a tool called Transparent Choice. It's a decision support tool where they can input all different kinds of information. And so you see a few of the inputs into that tool. You have the highly valued resources and assets assessment done by the U.S. Forest Service. You have the Dolores Watershed Resilient Forest. You can see their prioritization map, the Four Rivers prioritization map. Basically, whatever tool, CORAP, other wildfire risk assessments, all of that information can get pulled into these pods. And so if you see in the bottom left, that's a delineation of our potential operational delineations. And what we're using those is a way to break down the landscape into smaller pieces. You can input those different prioritization tools into that decision support, assign those to different pods, and then you'll be able to assess values and priorities based on kind of all of these different techniques and whatever modeling and prioritization you'd like to choose. So as we move forward, this is a look at kind of some of our initial rankings in terms of tiers of high and low priorities. But as we move forward, if you remember that dot map, you will start to see more deliberate clusters of that work happening together in these priority locations that we're showing, that are coming up in these pods. We're also engaging with an advisory network of, right now, it's almost, the list is over 40 other stakeholders and we're getting their input on where their priorities are across this landscape. And those key points, both the weighting, the input from the steering committee, and then the input from the advisory network, that's really going to start to inform our 10-year strategy, our specific goals, and our outcomes and measures for moving this forward over the next 10 years. One of the kind of key points as we come in closing is that we're not there yet. We've got a lot of work to do. There's a lot of great work that's already been happening. But if you look at the numbers, we had one large project this year, and that was a gift. It was amazing that it happened, but it's also something that maybe it happens every year if we're lucky. Maybe it doesn't happen again in this 10-year period. If you were to take that one project out, our average project size in southwestern Colorado on private lands is about 22 acres. So even if you aim at having one large project of around 1,000 acres, we'd still have to double the number of projects on private lands to be able to make this happen. And so we need help, and we need to bring support to Colorado State Forest Service, to NRCS, to Wildfire Adaptive Partners, to the EIF, so that we're going to be able to have this growth. And we're also going to need continued support in funding, as we have had on the federal side, to really pull these pieces together on public and private lands.